Welcome back. Here is our first guest, Selena Lyons.
Well, thank you very much for getting in touch. Do you think strategy is directed towards a particular outcome? And does the difference between plan and strategy, does one have a particular goal in mind and the other one not? Or is planning more about the chronology and the resource distribution, etc., and strategy something different?
I can only make a plan if I know something about the area.
Okay.
If I know the streets, or I have at least a guess where streets are and where mountains are, where buildings are, and where the rivers are, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If I talk about the geographical area, physical area. Yeah. If I have absolutely no idea what expects me over there in a completely new country, land, city, in whatever planet. You know. If I have absolutely no idea, I think I cannot make a plan, but I can have a strategy.
Yes.
And the strategy could be a set of rules, which, for instance, says, I'm just the first person walking to Australia. There's never been anybody before me here. And my strategy is, I try to walk slowly, carefully until a wild animal catches me, and then I try to defend myself. Yeah? And then I try to get to the next wild animal, and I expect that these animals are very different from the animals I know, and therefore they might be much more dangerous.
From my own experience,
Yes.
Particularly when I was doing my dissertation, actually. In Hong Kong, and I specialize in Southeast Asian art, particularly in the art market, and I looked at something called monolithic gallery culture and how art groups provided themselves with strategies rather than having a plan. I chose Hong Kong and HKU particularly so that I could specialize in Southeast Asian art. It's something that I was interested in. I came here to learn more, and also just you have to be a boots on the ground. If you're going to talk about contemporary art in a place, I think if you're going to study it, you ought to try and be there, at least for part of it, and go and talk to people and go and see what's happening for yourself. And it's really the only way that you can create authentic, discursive content and ideas and that sort of stuff. You need English, Cantonese and Mandarin in order to do that, really. And I like the idea of being able to match people's artistic interests. Now, I find that I find sometimes there are certain types when we talk about art in the art world who are slightly snobby, that might use a certain type of language. There are socioeconomic factors. If you're not part of that art world, sometimes it can feel very daunting, especially if you want to get involved. Maybe you're a first-time buyer, maybe you want to do it as a business investment, maybe a company wants to invest some of its finance in art or do up a restaurant or something. Art advisory. And so being a kind of matchmaker for people who are wanting to start to build collections, and knowing what's topical, knowing the shifts in the market and this type of things.
I think this simple picture that until 15th century, it's one story. I mean, absolutely only one story in art, and that is their faith. Is there anything comparable, but how is that in South Asian art?
What decides the topic is the socioeconomic wealth and the availability of commissions, and things that happened in the Middle Age, after that time, Alfred Joyce, you get more patrons, you get a rising middle class, and you get more freedom away from the monarchies and away from the faith. And very much the same thing happened in Asia. You have the dynasties, and you had the monks who would commission many pieces of artwork for a very long time. But then you also have schools opening up, which were more they were perhaps funded by monarchies, or by religious institutions, but they weren't necessarily dedicated solely to the depiction of portraiture or the depiction of something from the faith. They had a wider range of topics that were considered appealing and could go to market. If anything, they had, I would say, more of an artistic license from an earlier age than we did in the West, for sure.
So it becomes more or less a trial and error, where you say, can I find something new and can I find a buyer? If not, try something else, find a buyer for that.
This very much depends on what the object goal of that particular artist is.
Yes.
Is it, for example, commercial success or artistic expression? Is it fame or is it innovation? And all artists system, it is a business, they have to earn money. But if you want to take the example of Picasso, there are two arguments you can make here, because I mean, he obviously achieved a lot of commercial success, but if you read someone like John Berger, in terms of strategy, I think by the time Picasso had reached his fame, he'd reached his pinnacle, you would ask if he really had a strategy in the first place to get there. I mean, by the time he's sort of middle-aged, his strategy almost doesn't matter anymore, because whatever he paints sells. With Andy Warhol, his strategy was as much about his personality, his social life, as it was about his business. Their strategies are clearly quite they're directed at the commercial success of their art. But you also have artists whose plan is perhaps not that at all. And this is something that I looked at very much so in Hong Kong. Particularly for Hong Kong, artists here face a lot of problems like money, space to practice, space to show, and all of this. And in order to thrive or to grow or to make art in the first place, maybe their goal is just to be able to produce, I don't know, queer publics through different types of media, like online zines, instead of, if they can't have a gallery space, they can have an online zine. They might reach a more youthful public, people who don't necessarily have the economic, funds. But it's still going to be important in terms of taste shaping. A lot of the time in Hong Kong, you'll often see art and the art market combined with things like luxury and high fashion and this stuff as well. And this can be very restrictive for other artists and focus on producing. These are all strategies that they can use, and I would agree that they do not have they don't have a chronological plan. They don't necessarily know what their resources are yet. The strategy isn't directed to make a plan. The strategy is the plan itself.
Maybe at the beginning as an artist, you really need a strategy to even create a space in which you can be seen and in which your work can be seen.
But the differences between the art world and other businesses and employee strategies, that I think if you're making art, those external factors are they have a lot more say in the final product. So whether you might have an artwork that is very detailed and very planned, but that is going to be entirely dependent on whether it's commissioned or not, whether you, a bit like a writer, writers I'll have ideas for books years and years and years, and then other times I'll sit down and I'll write nothing, and then other times I'll sit down and I'll write something random and it'll turn into something, it'll flow. It's very much like that with artists as well. But then you also have the pressured of materials. A lot of artists, of course, are either solo, so they're either they're self-employed. For some, they've got to fund their own materials, their working spaces, their living costs, their gallery galleries, of course, don't mean what they charge to show their work, how long is it up for, whether they can loan it out. Legal terms as well. You know, when an artist sells a work and maybe they want to have it in a retrospective exhibition years down the line, there are all these kinds of extraneous factors which can affect the trajectory of an artist's well, business, their business side, or their success, depending on which point of view you want to call their success, you know, whether it's socioeconomic or artistic or innovative or whatever. Now, there will certainly be examples of that in Hong Kong, but you'd have to, and it's also very much, you know, unlike other businesses, art depends very much on the mental states of and the emotional states of that individual, where you have other businesses where as a team you can you know, make a strategy together, and whatever's going on in your personal life hopefully does not come into the workplace. It doesn't affect the productivity, the outcome, where it does very much for artists. Even if you're in an art collective, of course that is going to affect you. They have things like online published zines and things like that. They also have, there are lots of past exhibitions at local art galleries like Type 1 as well, where they might explain a little bit more about their genesis or their trajectory with particular works. I wish you the very best of luck with this podcast. It's very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, have a great evening. Yeah. Thank you for watching. See you next time when we talk about storytelling and leadership. Good night.
Unfortunately, the footage of the interviews with the other guests of this episode is lost and could not be recovered so far, mainly because we did not press the button to start the recording. If Richard Lipscomb, Anton Lorenz, Martin, and Daniel still talk to us, they will be interview guests in upcoming episodes of the Dietmar Tonight Show.
Use the like/dislike buttons in the comment section to give us valuable feedback. Press the subscribe button if you want to be informed about new episodes. And if you want to be a guest on the show, get in touch. Alpha and Leadership. AI and Leadership. Art and Leadership. Bullshit and Leadership. Career and Leadership. Change and Leadership. Coaching and Leadership. Conflict and Leadership. Consulting and Leadership. Creativity and Leadership. Crisis and Leadership. Cult and Leadership. Culture and Leadership.